If you live in the United States, invest in the stock market, contribute to a 401k, or simply trust that the dollar will always hold its value. Argentina may seem like a distant problem, another struggling country with poor leadership and bad decisions. But that assumption is exactly why Argentina's story matters so much, because Argentina is not just a failed economy, it is a completed experiment. A real-world financial laboratory that shows what happens when political incentives override economic reality, slowly, legally, and with public support. Argentina was once one of the richest countries on earth. At the beginning of the 20th century, its GDP per capita rivaled that of the United States and Western Europe. Buenos Aires was called the Paris of South America. Immigrants flooded in, natural resources were abundant, and the future looked unstoppable. Today, Argentina is a country where people check exchange rates before buying groceries, where inflation is measured in triple digits, and where saving money in the local currency is considered financial suicide. This didn't happen overnight, and that's the most important part. In the United States, inflation above 5% triggers panic. Politicians argue, media headlines explode, and the Federal Reserve steps in with emergency measures. In Argentina, inflation of 50%, 80%, or even over 100% has become part of daily life. Prices change weekly, sometimes daily, sometimes hourly. When inflation reaches that level, money stops being money. It no longer stores value. It becomes something you get rid of as fast as possible. And when that happens, an entire society is forced to think differently about work, savings, and survival. This is why economists call Argentina the world's greatest financial laboratory. Almost every major economic idea has been tested here: socialism, free markets, price controls, capital controls, currency pegs, massive welfare states, IMF bailouts, and extreme money printing. Not in theory, in real life, with real people, and real consequences. For Americans, this matters because many of the policies that destroyed Argentina's economy started with promises that sounded reasonable, compassionate, and even responsible. Argentina's collapse wasn't caused by a single villain or one bad year. It was the result of decades of decisions driven by populism. The idea that governments can deliver prosperity by spending more, controlling prices, and protecting people from economic pain without creating new costs. Politicians promised jobs, subsidies, cheap food, cheap transportation, early retirement, and generous pensions. When the money wasn't there, the solution was simple: borrow more or print more. In the short term, it worked. People felt relief. In the long term, it destroyed trust in the currency itself. And this is where Argentina becomes uncomfortable for an American audience, because the United States also relies heavily on debt. It also runs massive deficits. It also believes deeply in government intervention during crises. The difference is not philosophy, it's timing, scale, and credibility. Argentina shows what happens when those tools are overused for too long. Not through revolution or war, but through normal democratic processes. Imagine waking up in the United States knowing that your salary will lose value every single day it sits in your bank account. Imagine rushing to spend your paycheck immediately, not because you want luxury, but because waiting means becoming poorer. In Argentina, people don't save in pesos. They save in dollars, real estate, gold, or anything that can't be printed. The local currency is treated like a hot potato, useful only for transactions, never for storage. This is a critical lesson. Inflation is not just an economic problem. It is a psychological one. Once people lose trust in money, no law can force them to believe again. Argentina tried capital controls, banning dollar purchases, fixing prices, and threatening businesses. None of it worked. Markets don't disappear when you ban them. They go underground. Argentina's famous blue dollar black market exchange rate exists because reality always finds a way to express itself. For Americans, the US dollar feels untouchable. It is the world's reserve currency. Global trade runs on it. Oil is priced in it. Governments hold it as protection. But history offers a brutal reminder: no currency holds that position forever. The Roman denarius, the Dutch guilder, and the British pound all once dominated the world. They didn't collapse overnight. They declined gradually, through debt, overextension, and loss of confidence. Argentina's importance lies in the fact that its decline was slow enough for people to ignore it, until it wasn't. Each crisis was explained as temporary. Each bailout was framed as necessary. Each round of money printing was justified as emergency support. The cost was deferred. But deferred costs don't disappear, they compound. And eventually, they arrive all at once. Another reason Argentina matters to the U.S. audience is debt addiction. Argentina repeatedly borrowed from foreign lenders and international institutions, especially the IMF, each time the promise was reform. Each time political pressure weakened discipline, loans became bridges to nowhere. The result? Argentina became the IMF's most frequent client, not because the IMF failed, but because reforms without political will are meaningless. The United States is not Argentina. Its institutions are stronger, its economy is more diverse, its currency is trusted. But Argentina's story proves one thing clearly: no country is immune to basic economic laws. You cannot print prosperity. You cannot borrow forever. And you cannot control prices without creating shortages, black markets, or collapse. Ironically, Argentina's citizens have become some of the most financially adaptable people in the world. They diversify income streams, hedge currency risk instinctively, and think globally while living locally. When systems fail, individuals evolve. This is an uncomfortable truth for Americans who assume stability is permanent. Stability is not guaranteed. It is maintained. This chapter is not about fear. It's about awareness. Argentina is not a prediction. It is a demonstration. A demonstration of what happens when politics consistently outruns economics, when popularity matters more than productivity, and when money becomes a political tool instead of a neutral measure of value. As we move forward in this series, we won't look at Argentina as a cautionary tale meant to scare. We will analyze it as a case study meant to educate. Because the greatest financial disasters rarely begin with collapse. They begin with confidence, with the belief that this time is different. To understand why Argentina became the world's most extreme financial experiment, we need to move beyond headlines like corruption or bad leadership. Those explanations are too shallow. Argentina didn't collapse because it lacked intelligence, resources, or opportunity. It collapsed because it repeatedly chose short-term political comfort over long-term economic discipline. And it did so again and again, openly, democratically, and with public approval. Argentina is called the world's greatest financial laboratory, because almost every major economic idea has been tested here under real conditions, not in a classroom, not in a spreadsheet, but in a living society of 45 million people. Capital controls? Tested. Price freezes? Tested. Massive welfare states? Tested. Free market reforms? Tested. Currency pegs? Tested. Dollarization debates? Tested. IMF rescue programs? Tested multiple times? Few countries on Earth offer such a complete data set of economic cause and effect. What makes Argentina unique is not that it failed once. Many countries have failed. It's that Argentina failed, recovered, then failed again, over and over, each time trying a different policy mix. This repeated cycle turned the country into a natural experiment. A place where economists can observe what happens when theory meets political reality. The roots of this laboratory go back to Argentina's early success. When a country becomes rich quickly, it often develops a dangerous belief that prosperity is permanent. Argentina's wealth came from natural resources, agriculture, and global demand. It felt effortless. But wealth built on favorable conditions, rather than strong institutions, is fragile. When global conditions changed, Argentina responded not by reforming its structure, but by protecting its lifestyle. This is where populism entered the system. Populism, economically speaking, is not about left or right, it's about incentives. It promises immediate benefits today while pushing costs into the future. Argentina's governments repeatedly promised higher wages, cheaper goods, protected jobs, and expanded welfare, without increasing productivity. When reality pushed back, politicians didn't say, "We must adjust." They said, "The system is unfair," and offered more protection. Price controls were one of the earliest experiments. The logic sounded reasonable. If prices are rising, freeze them. The result was predictable. Businesses stopped producing. Shelves went empty. Black markets emerged. When prices are forced below reality, supply disappears. Argentina learned this lesson, then repeated it decades later, multiple times. Next came currency controls. When people tried to protect themselves by buying dollars, the government restricted access. Official exchange rates were fixed. Reality responded instantly. A parallel market was born. The blue dollar became the real indicator of value while the official rate became fiction. This is a crucial lesson for Americans. Markets do not disappear when banned, they decentralize. Argentina didn't become a financial laboratory because economists wanted it to. It became one because politics refused to accept economic limits. Every time Argentina faced a crisis, it had three choices: reduce spending, reform institutions, or delay the pain. It almost always chose delay, borrow more, print more, negotiate another bailout. Each decision bought time, and each time the cost of fixing the system grew larger. This cycle is especially important for a U.S. audience because the tools Argentina used, deficit spending, stimulus debt expansion, central bank intervention, are not foreign concepts. The difference is how often they are used and how politically difficult it is to stop using them. Another defining experiment in Argentina was money printing as policy. When governments cannot raise taxes and cannot borrow cheaply, printing money becomes tempting. Inflation is invisible at first. It doesn't feel like a tax until it does. Argentina printed pesos to fund subsidies, public jobs, pensions, and political promises. The result wasn't growth, it was currency collapse. Inflation became structural, not a temporary spike, but a permanent condition. Once inflation expectations are anchored, they become self-fulfilling. Workers demand higher wages. Businesses raise prices in advance. Savers flee the currency. And the central bank loses credibility. Argentina crossed that line long ago. From the outside, this may sound irrational. Why didn't Argentina simply stop? The answer is political survival. Cutting subsidies, reducing welfare, or shrinking government jobs is unpopular. Elections are short-term. Economics is long-term. Argentina's system rewarded politicians who postponed pain, not those who prevented it. This is why Argentina is such a powerful laboratory. It demonstrates that economic failure doesn't require dictatorship or chaos. It can happen inside a democracy, through legal votes, popular leaders, and good intentions. Another experiment Argentina ran was repeated engagement with the International Monetary Fund. Each IMF program came with conditions: fiscal discipline, spending cuts, structural reforms. Each time, the government accepted the money. Each time, political pressure diluted the reforms. The IMF didn't force Argentina to fail. Argentina used IMF loans to avoid making hard choices. This is a vital lesson for the U.S. and other developed nations. Bailouts do not fix systems. They stabilize them temporarily. Without reform, bailouts extend the life of broken incentives. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Argentina's economy is its people. Argentinians are not financially ignorant. In fact, they may be among the most financially adaptive populations in the world. Ordinary citizens hedge currency risk instinctively. They diversify income sources. They think in dollars while earning pesos. The system failed them, not the other way around. This is the final reason Argentina deserves its title as the world's greatest financial laboratory. It shows that when institutions fail, individuals innovate. But individual survival is not the same as national prosperity. For Americans watching this, the takeaway is not that the United States is doomed. It's that economic laws are universal, incentives matter, trust matters, discipline matters, and once credibility is lost, it is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. Argentina didn't wake up one day as a cautionary tale. It became one decision at a time. In the next chapter, we'll zoom in on one of the most destructive forces in this entire experiment, inflation, and how it transformed from a policy tool into a permanent way of life. Because once inflation becomes normal, nothing else ever is.